from a technology perspective, the amount of tech that's being built during these periods and over the last couple of years is mind-blowing. Try and understand the technology, at least at a high level, and its purpose, and be open-minded to why it's going to matter in 3, 5, 10 years. Just trying to understand as much as you can right now, just conceptually, if you can understand the basics of it, that can really help you not be caught off guard as the world becomes more digital.
Welcome to the Curious Corner, where we unravel the stories behind our guests through the lens of curiosity. In this episode, I'm joined by Gabriel Aleman, a tech enthusiast working in biz dev and partnerships for Rarible, one of the leading NFT marketplaces. Gabriel, thank you for agreeing to come on today. How are you doing?
I'm living the dream, my friend.
Glad to hear it. Okay, could you please give us a brief intro into who you are?
Oh man, brief and who I am. Okay. So I guess I'll kind of start, I was born and raised in quite a few places, from Oregon and the West Coast, and most of my life was in the Midwest in Michigan and Ohio. Most of the time, single parent raising 3 kids, and I was the oldest of them. So got into working very early on. I was a big sports guy back in the day. I grew up with epilepsy, and so made a decision at a young age that, hey, maybe my talents are better used in the business world than in sports where there's a lot more risk, right? And so, I've always had this competitive nature to me, always loved technology and been fascinated by it, and always wanted to work really hard to kind of elevate the experience of life that my family had. So at an early age, I started working at Best Buy, was there for about 5 years from 16 through most of college. And that kind of led me down the path of realizing I'm fascinated by people. I love people. And I'm a big fan of helping provide value and solutions to them. And maybe this is my way of being able to get paid while still being able to be a service to people, right? And still specifically in technology, engage things that I love and learn about them. So, when I was in college, I remember thinking, man, I wish I could have been born 20 years earlier. Maybe I could have been the Mark Cuban of the .com boom back in the early 2000s, and I missed it. And then I came to realize later on that these things happen in cycles, right? History repeats itself, and especially with technology, we're about to go through another revolution of technology, which we're going to talk about today. And so when I graduated, I had a couple of kind of odd jobs right out of college, and then found my way back into Web 2 traditional software sales, and kind of stayed the path over the last couple of years. I worked for some big tech companies where I kind of got a lot of good foundation around what I need to do to be successful in this type of role. And then got into the startup world where I wanted to have more of an impact at the business level, right? Yes, I'm doing my job of selling your product, providing value to our customers, but then also being able to make recommendations on the marketing side, on the product side, on the operation side, and bringing a lot of what I learned from these big companies into these smaller startups. Then early 2021, found my way through Gary Vee, who I've been following for years at that point, into Web3. I dabbled in crypto back in 2017, but wasn't crazy about the financial side of the world. I didn't understand it a lot. And so I was a little too emotional for that. But then when I found out about NFTs, non-fungible tokens, these digital assets that you can now own, a lot of things started to click for me about what human nature is like, how human behavior is going to be influenced by these things, why they matter at the technology level. Had no idea during that year we were going to be able to make and lose a lot of money during it. But I fell down the rabbit hole, and then about a year later found myself working for a company called Artblocks, which is a digital art company. And I was doing business development and sales for them, helped them build and scale a product. And then now I'm working for Rarible, one of the biggest NFT marketplaces that exists in Web3. And I'm doing business development and helping them scale their sales team as well. So have been in the space for going on 3 years now professionally, a couple extra years personally, and just continuing to dive into emerging tech, where our world is going, and helping to build at the foundational level all of the different pieces that are going to ultimately impact our world at scale.
100%. Yeah, I'm personally super excited for this episode because I feel like this is the first time on a podcast I'm really discussing technology. But to your point, it has such an impact on all our lives. And I think we're seeing it now with AI, especially, and, crypto as well and everything else. But just, I think the rate of change that is about to happen in the next 5, 10 years, 20 years is going to be crazy. And I think the scariest part is that majority of people don't see it and know it's coming. So therefore, I hope for anyone listening that this episode ends up being a bit of an insight into, some of the technology that we're talking about here and how it's going to have an impact on everyone's lives and why now is a good time to get educated about it because ultimately it's going to affect everyone. And as I said, the rate of change and the pace that this is coming is going to catch a lot of people off guard if people don't know about it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, we're talking about the rate of change to think, exponential curves, right? I think we're feeling the impacts of exponential adoption already, even though it might, when you're in the weeds of it, feel like a slower market. From a technology perspective, the amount of tech that's being built during these periods and over the last couple of years is mind blowing, and things that we wish, used to pray to God existed a couple of years ago when we were all in the heat and thick of it. And so I think a big part of that, and to help people not be caught off guard, one is to try and understand the technology, at least at a high level, and its purpose, and be open-minded to why it's going to matter in 3, 5, 10 years in a big way. But also looking at, and maybe even participating in helping build the foundational pieces that we're working on now, because that will allow us in those next 3, 5, 10 years to not even realize we're interacting with crypto or NFTs or anything on the blockchain. We're just going to understand why using this specific app over one that we're using now will be valuable to us, right? What are the value propositions of crypto and Web3? And so we're not caring about, this is an NFT. We're not even talking about it as an NFT. We're talking about this digital thing that I actually own. I'm able to own where I historically haven't been able to. And if it's art, I can then transact with it. There's proof of ownership, where it came from, that I have it. And that allows me to be able to sell it or hold on to it for a long, extensive period of time, or divide the ownership of this asset and do it in a way that's never been able to be done before, right? So I think just trying to understand as much as you can right now, because this space is changing so dramatically all the time. It's impossible to keep up with unless you're really in the weeds of it. But I think just conceptually, if you can understand the basics of it, that can really help you not be caught off guard as things start to become more ingrained into society and the ways that we're interacting with each other as the world becomes more digital.
100%. The world is only becoming more and more digital. Okay, we've already mentioned quite a few terms, which some people may already be a bit like, what are we talking about? So let's
Of course.
take a bit of a step back. Let's I'm going to try approach this from the lens of someone that has never, or they've heard of crypto, but probably that's about it, and try explain everything in as many simple simple terms as possible without people necessarily even knowing fully what crypto is. But hopefully now this episode will be that journey for them. So I guess, as you said earlier, technology goes in cycles, and the cryptocurrency that everyone will have heard of, or majority of people have heard of, is Bitcoin. I think if anyone is listening and is curious about crypto, most people at this point have heard of Bitcoin and know that that is a cryptocurrency. But then at that point, they don't actually know what cryptocurrency is. So how do you explain cryptocurrency to someone in simple terms?
I've heard this explained a million different ways, and Bitcoin, I'll do my best to kind of consolidate all of the things that I've heard and communicate it. With Bitcoin specifically, what I would recommend doing after this episode, if you want to go a little bit more in depth, is check out Michael Saylor. He owns a company used to be called MicroStrategy. I think it's just Strategy now. But he does an interview with Tom Bilyeu, and he's done a dozen of them, but his most recent one, at the time of this podcast, did a fantastic job of defining Bitcoin, its purpose, and the differences between Bitcoin and the million other currencies or cryptocurrencies that exist. But Bitcoin is one that you definitely want to understand. And so the best way to explain Bitcoin, um, I guess you kind of have to start at the blockchain level. And the blockchain is essentially think of it as a computer, right? And it's actually like a network of computers that are all verifying impartially that transactions are happening. So it allows me to be able to send anything digitally to Ben, and all of these computers all give a thumbs up that yes, Gabriel's wallet is the one that is sending it to Ben. Now it's writing it on a ledger, and now Ben has ownership of this. So it's kind of this ongoing forever ledger that is able to define proof of ownership of digital things. Okay. So that's the high level thing that you have to understand for the rest of this conversation. Then when you get into all of the different things that live in the blockchain space, so we can talk about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is one of the original digital currencies that was created by this mysterious person that we don't know who it is. They created this technology anonymously and then basically disappeared off the face of the earth. They might be dead. They might be alive. Who knows? We're going to have a fun time finding out, but there's all these different theories around it. And the reason that's so important is because them doing that and kind of giving this technology and gifting it to the world has allowed Bitcoin to be such a prominent thing because nobody controls it. There's only 21 million coins that exist in the world. And for context, there are more millionaires than there are Bitcoin, which means at some point, if we get to a point where every single person in the world wants to own Bitcoin, every millionaire will not have the ability to purchase a singular Bitcoin. And this is why, as it gets more popular and people want to own this thing, the price continues to grow. Over a long enough period of time, it has outperformed the S&P 500 and pretty much every investment that people have made over the last 15 years. Okay. And so because of all of these things, Bitcoin is viewed as a store of value in the same way that gold is, in the same way or similar way that real estate is. And so it's less of, even though we call it a cryptocurrency, it's less of a currency and more of a
Store of
essentially
value.
like, yeah, store value and investment. It's one of those things that you don't buy and then sell. You buy it and you hold it and you just have it as a store of value, right? And so like when you buy a house, if you own 100% of it, it's completely paid off. You can now take loans against it because there's inherent values that we all have agreed upon for the value of this property. And so you can take out a loan to loan against it, right? And this is why I mentioned Michael Saylor. He's one of the biggest his company is one of the biggest holders of Bitcoin in the world. And that he's making that big of a bet from a business perspective, because as people start to realize that this is actually not going away and this is going to be the largest store of value, this is why we're creating strategic reserves in the government right now. Um, it the price is going to continue to grow. So you're going to be able to earn more value on that initial investment, and then you'll be able to leverage that investment for years, decades, centuries to come, right? At least until supercomputers come out and we're able to crack the blockchain, which probably won't happen in our lifetime. So the biggest thing, TLDR of this all, is that it is a long-term store of value. You buy it, you never sell it. You can if you need to, but ideally you just want to try and own as much Bitcoin as possible. And so even if that's putting $20 a day into it, or $100 a month into it, whatever you can afford to do, the goal should be to try and own as much Bitcoin as possible early on. And even at these big looking numbers for the price of a singular Bitcoin, we are very, very early in the grand scheme of things. And so right now, that's like the number one thing that you should be spending your time trying to understand and ultimately acquire when it comes to this emerging technology space that we're in.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's often described as digital gold, right, for that store of value. And this is the first time that there's been a new asset class where everyone has had access to it from day one. Usually, if it was like stocks, when you obviously have like the angel investors in the company or like the pre-seed investors, And then by the time it IPOs and actually makes it onto, one of the trading apps like Robinhood or Trading 212 where you can actually buy it, then it's already been through 5 different investment rounds. The investors have already made their money, and now you're buying into it for the first time. Whereas with cryptocurrency in general, yes, there's risks attached to it, but also at the same time, something like Bitcoin is quite a safe bet when literally the US government and these governments around the world are buying into it, but they still have a lot of red tape and boundaries and regulations they have to play by. Where right now on a consumer level, anyone could buy it. And
This
yeah,
That's exactly it, right? Like, this is democratizing capital, and capital is the word I was looking for rather than currency. Because it allows, if you want to go invest into a company before they're like public, right? You have to be what's called an accredited investor. To become an accredited investor, you have to have a certain net worth, which I think is 250,000. And there's minimum amounts of investments that you have to be able to put in. Usually it's 10, 15, 20K. And most people don't have access to this kind of money to be able to invest in a 10-year plan, right? And so while I talk about Bitcoin as the thing to acquire and never sell, right? So that kind of aligns with that 10, 15, 20-year plan. You have the ability to buy it and then sell it in a week, or sell it in 2 weeks, or sell it the next day if your transaction goes through, right? So, and you can buy tiny little amounts of it. You can buy $1 of Bitcoin. You can buy $2 of Bitcoin. You can buy $1,000 of Bitcoin. You can buy as much of it as you want, right? And so that's where it gets really interesting, because the average person now has access to this asset class, that they can actually change what their entire future is going to look like. I personally believe, and this isn't financial advice, this is just what I believe based on what I've learned, that it is going to outperform pretty much every other investment class over the next 20 years. And so that includes the S&P 500, that includes 401ks, that includes pretty much anything. And so, especially if you're young in your 20s and early 30s, it's like, this is a great opportunity to be able to set yourself up and your family up, depending on the scale that you can get into at, for a major change when it comes to the financial side of your family tree. And so it's definitely one of the most important things to understand, because it'll help you understand the blockchain and this whole space from like ground zero, but then also get involved in, because it is very easy, is low hanging fruit, that with almost every single super easy to onboard platform that you can create a wallet and start buying this stuff. You can buy it with a credit card now. Like, you can get involved and start owning these things. And so it's definitely the first place that I would recommend anybody to start. You might have friends telling you about these meme coins that are going 1,000x and whatever, but they don't tell you about the ones that they're putting money into leading up to that they're losing everything on, right? Or there's different communities, but I refer to them as cults, that are around things like XRP, that's just all speculative and, promising these massive returns. Bitcoin's the only thing that's been proven long enough that it's not going anywhere. It's not going to go to zero. I mean, if it goes even a fraction of what it's at now, people are going to buy it back up, because there's so many people that understand that this matters. And it doesn't fluctuate that dramatically. At least not dramatically enough to scare me away. If your time horizon of buying it and holding it is long enough, you will make a return on it.
yeah. We keep mentioning word blockchain. I know we kind of touched on it a bit, but I feel like we should maybe touch on it a bit more, and like
Sure.
why it matters in relation to crypto. And I guess, why essentially the blockchain as a solution with these digital tokens on top is a better
Mhm.
system than the current financial system.
Sure. So I'll even take it a step further. So the reason the blockchain matters, I don't think it's any secret that the world is becoming more and more digital every day, every year, right? And so we're spending more and more of our time in this digital space. We used to, in order to have a podcast, have to be in the same room. Now we can go and do this from anywhere in the world. I've worked remotely for 5 years. Other than going to conferences, I do my job at scale and way better than, and more efficiently than when I used to have to get in a car and drive to meetings. now because I can do it digitally. And so we're spending all this time digitally. And one thing I don't hear a lot of people talk about that I personally is a big catalyst to my belief in this is thinking about the next generation. Kids are being born with iPads, right? Like they come out with an iPad in their hands. And so they ultimately, 20 years from now, are going to have adult money and value things that they grew up with. And they don't know a world where they can't engage with anyone in the world immediately, right? And so this digital thing, and us spending more and more time in the digital space, especially with VR coming, like being more developed, all of these things are forcing us to live our lives more and more online and in a digital manner. And so when you think about that, the current state, or we'll go back, 10 years before the blockchain was really talked about, there was no way to be able to own things digitally. An argument could be made that, kids will go and spend money online to go and buy these things. We used to buy these things in Farmville and RuneScape, all these digital things that we might be familiar with. Our kids are more in like the Fortnite and Roblox, right? But they don't actually own these things, right? It says on their account that they do, but if Roblox shuts down, all of the things that they spent money on are gone. So they never actually owned these things, right? And you can't resell these things for value that goes back into your bank account. And so I also talk about digital artists. There's a medium of digital art called generative art. It's art created by code. And this has been around for 50 plus years at this point, since computers existed. But it has never really been talked about as a high value medium of art because you couldn't own it, right? You could print it out, and then maybe if you became a big prominent artist, you could sell the print, but it wasn't in its native form, which is digital. And so if I go and create a digital piece of art and I want to sell it to you, you'll say, well, why wouldn't I just screenshot it? And historically, that would be true because there's no way of tracking where it came from, right? And so what the blockchain does is it allows us to be able to track the creation and transactions and movement of all of these things digitally, which creates this infrastructure level that allows us to be able to transact on things digitally. To be able to do that, you also need a digital currency or some form of payment method. And this is where crypto comes in. And all of these things that are unique that I want to go and sell to you are what's called non-fungible, meaning that they can't be replicated. It is proven that even if two things look alike, they are different things, different assets. And the blockchain allows us to be able to understand that even though they might be identical, let's say it's a 1 of 10 and they are all perfectly the same on paper. It can say this is the 1 of 10, this is the 2 of 10, this is the 3 of 10, and allows us to differentiate those things, allows us to understand that I own this thing and be able to then transact for value. And so that's where like the blockchain is kind of this orchestrator of all of these different movements of digital things and why it's so important. Because as we become more digital, we'll want to create and transact across peer-to-peer digitally as well, in the same way we do IRL in person, right? With physical things, digital goods become just as valuable and some more valuable. And so we need the infrastructure to be able to actually engage with transactions across both creating and buying and selling. And in order to do that, we need the blockchain. And that's why the blockchain specifically is so important and at a foundational level, the thing that allows all of these other things that we might talk about to be possible.
Yeah, 100%. As you said, this public database whereby you can see everything on it and who's owned it and the paper trail of where it came from. You can verify that it came from the original source and that it's not a fake. And there's quite a few issues, I guess, in general within society that people don't necessarily see. One would be digitally, there's obviously a lot of fakes. And when people buy products, people get caught out because they buy, the fake of, trading cards or a fake watch or fake concert tickets or something else. Whereas actually, if this was all on this public database, this blockchain, then you'd be able to verify straight away whether or not that it was a legitimate item or not, and that it came from the original manufacturer, or if it was if it is fraud.
Yeah, I mean, blockchain's been involved in logistics companies for 5+ years. Like so many logistics companies utilize the blockchain to be able to track movement of physical goods across all of these different processes, the manufacturing process, until it gets to the consumer. It allows um, all of these things to be on a ledger, verified. Like there's no human mistakes that can be involved because the blockchain just doesn't allow it, right? And so you probably heard me mention as a listener Web 2 or Web 3, right? And so there's the way that we define these things is there's three different phases of the internet that have been created in our lifetime. So Web 1, we call the read internet. So this was the first time we were able to read things digitally. This is where we're looking at newsletters and blogs and things, right? And kind of researching information, access to information. Then there's the write internet. So it's read and write. This is the social aspect of it where we can now go and we can create images and texts. We've got, X, previously Twitter, Instagram, all of these different social platforms. So this is the read and write internet, what we've been experiencing, still are today. Web 3 is defined as the read, write, own, because you actually have ownership of all of these digital things from anything that you're creating, like art, your photos that you're posting online, all of really the reason it's so important is because you have ownership over your data in this world where the blockchain is the primary component of this, right? And that's a huge thing that's been an issue for a decade plus now, is we don't have access to our ownership over our data. And so all these big tech companies are monetizing off of our data. And that doesn't feel right, right? Like as a creator, I want to be able to earn a portion of that revenue if I'm giving them access to it. I should be able, since I own it, I should be able to get royalties off of you utilizing this for ads or whatever, right? More than just having to be a certain tier of creator and then you're getting a small little kickback. And so there's a lot of opportunity, again, for the non-people with 1 million followers to be able to monetize their data in a world where the blockchain is the primary component of this. And so there's so many different aspects of what we know today. And I think we just kind of have accepted it, that we need to rethink how our privacy and data and contributions to these platforms is being monetized, and kind of get a little upset about how the fact that we're not getting anything for it when we're the ones creating the value. And so this is where it gets really, really exciting. And, you kind of talked about verification of things, especially with AI. To your point, we're seeing so many deep fakes. And what if instead of going and trying to say, okay, was this created by AI? The blockchain was the primary component of that social platform, and it was able to say this was created by AI definitively because they can see where it was created. It tracked it all the way from its initial point of origin all the way to what you're seeing, and is able to definitively say this is not real. Like that's huge, and that's critical in a world where AI continues to be more and more important, right? And nobody's talking about that. And so these are a lot of the different facets where blockchain becomes essential from a infrastructure perspective, and then everything else gets built on top of that, including AI, to be able to create a safe world that we all can say, okay, like we know where everything's coming from. We are able to interact digitally in a safe manner. And there's a lot of these things being built in the background right now. They're just not at the point where they're ready for scale.
Yeah, we need that, as you said, with AI and deepfakes. Yeah, AI is like scarily getting to a point where you can't tell the difference. And we do need that world where it knows for sure it's AI. And because otherwise, we end up in a world where people don't know what the truth actually is. And
That's where we're trying to get out of right now, right? Is this concept of fake news. You listen to old legacy media and it's like, okay, well, what are their intentions behind reporting this? I don't want to listen to something and then have to go and say, like, question everything that I'm listening to. That's exhausting, right? And then, okay, I heard this thing. Let me go do a bunch of research from a bunch of other media outlets that are all giving some kind of biased take and then have to formulate my own thought. Most people aren't going to take the time to do that, which is why you have so much misinformation that actually works and gets a lot of attention, and everybody has such extreme opinions. And so what if we could create a world where that was less likely to happen at scale? That's super interesting to me. And I think it should be interesting to a lot of people, because at the end of the day, we just all want the truth. We want to understand what's going on at every form or every level of government and society that we're experiencing, regardless of where we live. And so these are, again, just all critical things that we're thinking about in this space and continuously building towards.
Yeah. We've touched on Bitcoin, which we've said is digital gold. What about the difference between Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies like Ethereum?
Yeah, so Bitcoin is really its own. It gets kind of meshed into just cryptocurrencies, and again, I've talked about it more as capital than currency, right? And then you've got, I work in a space where I'm constantly having conversations with different blockchains, and blockchains are the infrastructure that these tokens live on. Tokens being cryptocurrencies, and so there's new ones popping up every single day. It's impossible to keep up with. And I think at some point, we're frankly not going to care about what these tokens are, or why one's a place that I should be transacting and doing things on versus another. In the same way, I don't care what code that a website was written by, right? I just care that it works and it's seamless and easy to use. And so I don't want to get too deep on the technical side, but like you mentioned Ethereum, this is another big name that has been around for a long time. And Ethereum specifically is very much um, a foundational layer that's very secure, accessible, and there's so many layers that are being built on top of it that make it cheap and fast, and allow things to be built from different apps that are called dApps in the space to be able to be built at scale. And so Ethereum is kind of I look at it as like the internet layer, right? So when you go onto the internet in this world in Web3, that is going to be all powered by Ethereum. And there's a bunch of different tokens that lay on top of that. But that is kind of the standard at this point from a security perspective. It is one of the most secure networks. And everything built on top of that are the things that allow us to be able to do it at scale. Because Ethereum inherently is very slow and expensive to transact on. And so that's what's called a layer one. And then you have layer twos and threes that get built on top of this that allow that to be cheap and very, very fast, be able to handle a lot of transaction volumes at the same time. And so that's where you can actually build applications that millions or billions of people can use at scale. And that's where things start getting really fun at the consumer level, because then again, I don't care that what network it's being built on, Ethereum, Solana, whatever. I just care that this game that I'm playing is fun and it's a good quality game and my friends are playing it and I can go and make a transaction and it happens instantly in the same way I order on Amazon and 2 minutes later it's at my door nowadays, right? Like that's what I expect as a consumer. And so Ethereum is kind of the foundational security level that all of these things are being built on top of. And there's other ones that people are trying to like assimilate to and build on top of. And I'm sure some of those will be successful as well. But these other tokens, like you've got the Ethereum token, but then you also have Base, which is a layer 2 on Ethereum. And so like you don't have to understand all of that. At the end of the day, it's just knowing these other platforms outside of Bitcoin are trying to be these technological layers that things that we're used to, whether it's banks or institutions or games or social media platforms, anything like that that we're already using are being built on. It's just a new network, a new internet and that's why they talk about it as like the next internet. It's because all these things are being built on primarily Ethereum.
Yeah. Yeah. So Bitcoin is digital gold and Ethereum is the layer of the internet where all these applications are being built. And within that, you have gaming, you have entertainment, you have, so many industries that are on top of this.
Yeah. Art is a big one.
Yeah. And a lot of the NFT infrastructure is being built on Ethereum. And NFTs are these digital assets, which could literally be anything, as we kind of said earlier. It could be a game skin, for your character. It could be a concert ticket. It could be, like literally basically any form of digital contract can be represented by that. And I guess like a common question would be, because people hear about these things, but they always kind of go back to like, why do these even have value in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. So I want to kind of break this down because What a lot of people, when they hear the word NFT, they think back to 2021, 2022, where it was just monkeys and crypto punks and these like big names that people were making tons of money on, right? They're
Yeah.
spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to buy. And it's like, why am I doing it? Right? I already talked about, because the first argument is I can screenshot it. I already talked about why that's not the case, right? And so the second piece is that was a phase back in 2000 when every business was IPOing and there were all these stocks that were worth millions of billions of dollars, right? And eventually there was just a big crash. So that's kind of what happened back in 2021 is we got access to this technology. It became very fun. Like the reason that what we call PFPs, these like random pictures of things that didn't make sense, became so valuable is because it was just fun. Like it created cultures and communities around these different assets and projects. And so people bought in and they wanted access to different events that were exclusive to owning these things. Because again, I can prove that I own a CryptoPunk or a Bored Ape or a VFriend with my wallet because the blockchain exists. And so when I go to an event, I can show them my wallet and they can say, hey, oh, he does own this thing. It's not a screenshot because they can prove it. And now he gets access to this or access to these different Discord communities. And so it was more about culture and community back then. And I think there's still an aspect of that for projects that are still around now. So that's really important to understand. The second piece is like, okay, NFT, it stands for non-fungible token. So you have fungible tokens, which are cryptocurrencies. That means like if I have a Bitcoin and Ben has a Bitcoin, they're indistinguishable from each other. They are both Bitcoin. They're exactly the same, have the same value. With non-fungible tokens, this goes back to what I mentioned. Like it can define, okay, this is a 1 of 10. I own the 1 of 10. Ben owns the 3 of 10, even though they look exactly the same. At the contract layer, they are defined as different assets. And so they might have different values to them. So that's important to understand. When it comes to understanding NFTs and why they have value, I think the ones that have value now has to do with culture and provenance. So CryptoPunks, I had mentioned, they were created and they were given away for free. And this was back in, I think, 2018 or 2017. People bought them for free. It was one of the first non-fungible tokens, which I think we've proven there's like 1 or 2 projects before them, but identified for a long time as one of the first that existed. So it has historical provenance. The creators of that project don't have to do anything, and it will continue to grow in value because it has historical provenance. In the same way, there's art, digital art. I have a chromie squiggle behind me, which was created by Snowfro, Eric Calderon. It was one of the first digital pieces of generative art, which is a medium of art in the same way there's painting and drawing, etc., that was put on the blockchain. And so you don't have to do anything with that project, but it has historical provenance, and that's why it continues to grow in value. And Eric's become this big provenant artist. He started a big company. It was one of the ones I worked for before. And that's what's allowed the value of it to continue to grow because it's created a community around it. People love art. They love that medium of art. Generative art, I think, is one of the most, or in the most museums in the world in terms of a digital format of art, even more than AI. But AI with the blockchain can now become provenant art, right? And because you can own it, you can't just screenshot it. You can, but that has no value. And so when you understand these things, you start to see, okay, well, you've got these digital things you can own. A big conversation that we're talking about right now in the industry are RWAs, real world assets. So you had mentioned real estate. So instead of having to go through the gruesome process of buying a home and having all these middlemen involved and all these fees involved, what if I own a home and the deed, like we used to have the physical deed, that's how you had proof of ownership. What if it was a digital deed? And Ben's able to say, I'm going to make an offer on this home because I list it for sale and I want to accept that offer. And I go hit accept. It now gets moved into his name. And now he owns that property because all real estate is represented digitally by digital deeds. You don't need middlemen. You don't need transaction fees. It happens instantly and seamlessly. And there's still going to be your taxes and all this other stuff on it, but you're going to be able to cut out a lot of the middlemen. because it's just mutually agreed upon in the world that all ownership of physical assets is represented digitally, and that's how we transact is digitally now. And so that is considered an NFT because one deed is different than another deed, even if they look identical, even if it's a cookie cutter home place. I can say I own this deed digitally, and now Ben owns it, and so now he owns the physical property, he has the rights to it because he owns the digital deed. And so there's so many different applications, and this is why NFTs got really interesting to me, was because there's a contract, what's called a smart contract, that's represented digitally that people create, and it's tied to either physical things or purely digital things like skins in Fortnite. So, you know, it's not about buying something and it going up and me making money, right? That was 2021. We went crazy with that. Like when I go and buy a shirt at, we'll call it American Eagle, right? I spend $30 on a shirt. I wear it for a year and then I get tired of it. And instead of I either just donate it to Goodwill or maybe I'll have a bunch of stuff. I want to see if I can get a few bucks for it, right? So I go and take it to a resale shop, Route 21 or whatever's near you, and they give me $2 for it. I'm pumped, right? Like I didn't make money on that shirt. I spent money, so gave value to a company who created it. I got the value of owning the shirt. I get to wear it, got compliments, felt good in it. I no longer want this shirt. Somebody else might. I go and sell it to another store that will then transact that to another person for $10 or $5. So they make money on it. And I go and now get $2 back for it. Like I didn't care about making the money. I got my value out of it. But if I can get a couple bucks back, cool. Right? That same thing could happen with Fortnite skins. I go and buy a skin. I love it. I'm pumped about it. I spent $30 on this skin. And then 6 months later, there's a new skin I want, and I want to wear that one. I have no use for this other one. But right now I can't resell it, right? I can't get any value for it. But if I could go and resell it for $5, I'd be stoked about that because now that new skin I want that's $30 is now only 25 in my head, right? Like these things can happen when when all of these things are now NFTs, non-fungible tokens. And in a world, especially in gaming, where that becomes very provident, what if I could wear that skin in Roblox and that same skin that I love in Call of Duty? That'd be pretty cool. Like I love this skin. I want this to be my digital identity, and now I can do that, right? It becomes interoperable. Right now you can't. You're locked into that game, and then if Fortnite goes away, then you never have that again, and your money's gone because you already spent it. So these are just a handful of different ways, and there's so many more I could get into, where NFTs matter as we become more digital and spend more time in a digital world. Them being able to be verified that you own it, interoperable, you can resell them, and it's not about making money, right? Maybe art collecting. There's always an aspect of collecting things, which we've done physically. Like just compare it to the physical world that you live in now. Like it's all the same stuff. We're just trying to build the infrastructure for that to happen digitally. And that's what these things are doing.
Yeah. And I'd say like all of this, like I think if you're traditionally a collector yourself, this might be easier to understand because if you collect sports cards, pins, like sneakers, whatever it is, everything you collect is some form of communication, whether you realize it or not. So when you're buying the limited edition skin on Fortnite, you might buy it because you think it's cool and you really want it, sure. But also at the same time, by you wearing that skin, you're communicating with everyone else that you've got a brand new skin or the limited edition skin, and they
Yeah.
probably haven't.
In the same way you
So
collect,
it's all
like you buy
communication.
really nice drop of shoes that there's only 100 pairs, right?
Yeah.
Somebody who's a shoe collector will see those, and that's communicating something to them.
Although ironically, the amount we spend on physical collectibles, a majority of them just end up being sat on a shelf in our bedroom or, never leave our house. But with a digital world, there are millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions of people that we can social signal to and communicate with at any given moment.
Oh,
And
100%.
yeah, like that's why.
Yeah, like I've got a whole shelf that's just full of these physical things, but the only people who know that I have these, I either bought them from or posted online that I bought them, or people who come here, right? But if you have a digital wallet, then anytime somebody's curious about what does this guy own, we can go and see this digital wallet, assuming that it's public, that you own it, and then they can see everything that you own, right? And so that allows not only like it's kind of flexing in that point, right? But at scale. But also allows more interested parties that, let's say, you want, might be open to selling something that you own. It can happen instantly. They can make an offer right there on the spot, because they might value it more than you do. And so it allows that transaction to be significantly easier versus going on eBay and listing it online. And then you got to pay 15% fees, and then you got to pay shipping. And so, like, digital stuff, it's way lower of a barrier. And as we continue to value digital things more and more, and the same, if not even more, for some of them, digitally versus physically, the infrastructure is super, super important. And so we're still building a lot of the infrastructure level to make all of this stuff possible. I believe the tech's there. We have it. We're just not, as an industry, using it at scale altogether yet, because a lot of it's still being fleshed out. But we're there, if not nearly there. And things are about to get a lot more fun in terms of being able to bring this stuff into the real world. There's already evidence of it happening now, at a lot of different places. But that's really what I think the industry is focused on now is we have the tech. Now let's actually start using it and putting the stuff out into the real world. And ultimately, over a long enough time horizon, the entire world is going to be adopting this stuff, and they won't even realize that they are, which is kind of the point. Like, I don't say, hey, let's go take a PNG together, right? I say, let's take a photo.
Yeah.
You don't care that it's a PNG or a JPEG or an MP4, if it's a video or whatever. You just, like, we have names for this, right? These will just be digital assets. They're not going to be NFTs, even though they are. Like, I don't care what code that this website was written on. I don't care what company used the code, like that it's Shopify. I just care that it works.
Yeah.
And I can pay very easily in the same way that I always have. And that's the stuff that we're building right now to make that possible.
Yeah. Historical, cultural relevance, provenance, scarcity, utility. Yeah, I think those are main things. What about the people that still say that they think crypto and NFTs are a scam? Because that's like the headlines,
Yeah.
right? The headlines, legacy media, as you were saying earlier, will just
Yeah.
for the longest time say these are scams.
100%. I mean, there's scams out there, right? And it's unfortunate. There's just bad people in the world that try to take advantage of opportunities. There was a lot of that when all the attention is there, there's a ton of it, right? So we saw a lot of that in 21 with NFTs, or a lot of scams on the latter half of it, once people understood that people were just making money with the stuff. We saw that this last winter with meme coins. There's just a lot of what we call rug pulls. So people going and selling something, running the price up, they owned 84% of it and sold all of it, and the whole price went down. So everybody lost money. But we see the same stuff now. Like, there are credit card scams, right? There's people putting readers on credit card machines and taking your identity and running off with your money. Like, there's scams everywhere. There's bad people everywhere. We just don't, we're almost like desensitized to it in the real world, or in the physical world. And so we don't talk about it as much, but when there's this new intimidating technology that's going to change everybody's life in a really positive way. It gets a lot of skepticism in the early days, in the same way the internet did, the same way phones did. And so that's where a lot of the headlines, where they go, they don't talk about all of the amazing things that we're building right now. They talk about the one big boom of a, headline that they could put, that people were scammed out of millions of dollars on this thing. And that's what people read. And if you're not spending the time to do your own research and kind of dive into why is this stuff still here if it's just a big scam, then you won't understand, like, the importance of it. And one scam isn't going to shut down the entire industry, right? It might create if it's big enough, like FTX, it might create a lull, but people are still building over the last couple of years after that happened. We're still continuing to build this stuff because we care. It's important. It's really, really important as we become more digitally. Without it, AI takes over the world. Everything is a fake, and we couldn't tell. And we just kind of get stuck in this lack of innovation, especially in the United States, which we're trying to get out of. And so it's really important to understand what's actually happening here. Not let a scam deter you from understanding it. It can make you, it's important to understand they're there and learn what you need to do in order to prevent being scammed yourself, right? Like, don't just follow the headlines. Make sure that you have security set up with your wallet, which there's a lot of new tech involved that can help you with that now. Um, and so, like, protect yourself in the same way you do with your physical credit cards and debit cards. Um, but at the same time, like, just try and understand the technology, why it's important, why it matters, how it's going to impact your future and your kids' future. Um, I think that's the biggest thing to focus on rather than just the headlines.
I agree. Couldn't agree more. Read past the headlines and
Always.
have an open mindset. Don't just take it for what it is.
Well, just be curious.
How important do you think curiosity is when it comes to new tech and in general?
I mean, I'm slightly biased because I'm genuinely passionate about emerging technology, and I love technology even with all of its faults. Um, and I frankly just think you have to lean into it because it's inevitable. Like, tech people are going to continue to create new technology that makes our world look different, right? And change the way that humans interact with each other. And so if that's the case and I can't change that at a global scale, then okay, well, I should lean into it, try and understand it. This is where the curiosity comes in and just tinker around with it. Try something like ChatGPT is free. Go onto it, put in a prompt, see what happens, right? Like just play around with it. Because if you don't, you're going to get caught off guard. If you do it, go a long enough period of time and you'll be at the point where it's 2025 and you don't know how to use an Excel document, right? Like ChatGPT can now write an Excel document for you. I say this because I just had a conversation with my mom who literally can't do anything with Excel or PowerPoint or anything, right? And that, like, we don't even need that anymore. But she can't because she never was curious enough to go and play around with it and just try and keep up with what's going on. Try at a high level, even just try and understand it. You don't have to get super in the weeds, but if something sparks your interest, then dive in a little deeper, right? Like you can't read a book and understand the space. You can't. You can get a high level view and try and understand the different pieces that are all happening because it's such a big industry and there's so many different aspects of it. But you have to be curious enough to just go and learn and seek more knowledge and play with stuff, like actually get your hands dirty on some of the stuff. Create a wallet, right? Put a little bit of money in it. Go and buy a super cheap NFT. Get that feeling. Go and buy $10 worth of Bitcoin. Like, see what transaction fees come out. And like try and understand these things, right? Go and get a super secure hardware wallet. Like, figure out what a hardware wallet is. Set it up. Put a small amount of money in that you can afford to lose in case you mess it up. Right? Like, do these really low risk things just so you can understand how things work. Because I think you'll be wildly surprised about how easy a lot of it is, how you'll be frustrated with how complicated some of it still is. I still am. And we're working on making a lot of that easier. But I think some of these things, you just have to get your hands dirty. And if you don't have a curious spirit, then you're just going to get caught off guard and not understand any of it when it completely changes the way that we interact, right? And you're going to be that person that is on Facebook when Twitter or when TikTok is a thing, right? And we all make fun of our parents for still living on Facebook when it's like we got rid of that like 3 apps ago. The only reason I'm on there is for my family, right? We all say that, but it's like we went through an Instagram era and then we went through a TikTok area and there's all these new social apps coming out. And so, who knows what's coming up next? Now we're getting into social selling. And so, like, if I mention social selling to my mom, she's like, what the hell is that? And so, like, the only way to keep up with it is to just tinker around with it. You don't have to go all in. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars, get involved in a scam. Although sometimes there's more learning lessons that come out of that, right? Just don't put money in that you're not afraid to lose. Don't get greedy, but just try and understand the technology, like the tech. That's really, really, really important in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think getting hands on with it is definitely the best way of learning. And yeah, as you said, play around with small amounts and make it so that you can have, risk tolerance and make it small so that if you lose it or you mess up, whatever, then it's fine. But yeah, just lean in. I mean, I'd like to think anyone listening to this podcast is naturally curious anyway, after it's called Curious Corner. But um, yeah, I agree. Just leaning into curiosity more is just a big point. And I think the other thing then, when you do make it in, and I know we've kind of gone through this, is just patience.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're trying to be patient for, right? But like a lot of times, what tends to make patience more tolerable? It's doing things, right? And so that's where like playing around with it helps versus just like going and expect like when people come in here and they heard that their friend made a lot of money in it and they want to do the same thing. Like that doesn't that more people, significantly more people lose money than make money, right? And so you can't necessarily come here and plan to extract. Find a way to add value, right? That's what all of us are still here trying to do. It's just add value, right? And then if you want to make a few bets and investments in it, go for it. Don't spend money you can't afford to lose. But like if you have conviction in something, once you understand the ecosystem, go for it. A lot of us are, right? I mean, I'm betting my career on it. I got curious because somebody who has added a lot of value to my life created a project, and that felt like I understood. He did a great job explaining the technology, and I understood technology, and so it clicked a light bulb for me. I didn't know you could make money with this stuff, or lose money. And so, I invested a little bit in it, and I found one of the most amazing communities, in my opinion, in the entire space. I've made so many lifelong friends, Ben being one of them. Like so many people I've been able to create connections with all over the world. There's very few places in this world I can go to and not have somebody that I've connected with at this point after being in it for 5 years. Um, it drew my career into it and wanting to add more value and help build. And that's what I did my last role and in this role. Right. So I'm betting everything on it and just getting more and more deep. I never expected that when I'd heard about this NFT thing. Right. But that's just kind of accidentally happened. And it happened from being curious and just trying to understand what's going on and playing around and tinkering with it and ultimately becoming so obsessed with it that I just had this urge to want to be able to help bring it to fruition to this big golden era state that we've been talking about. And so I think, that might not happen to everybody, but it might happen to a few people, and it's changed my life. And I think it has the impact to change a lot of people's lives. And if nothing else, find some more people around the world that you connect with. And as we spend more and more time online, the line is going to be blurred about like, oh, these are your online friends versus your in real life friends. Like they're just your friends, man. And now we have the technology to be able to hang out digitally and excuses to gather around on Twitter spaces and Discord meetups. And, oh, hey, like there's a big conference in your town and a bunch of them are coming there. Now you have an excuse to go and hang out with them in real life. Like they're just my friends. They're not my online friends anymore, right? And again, that just like there's so many different communities and amazing people in this space right now that all have great intentions. They're all super curious. They're all very intelligent, um, and all have great intentions. And so it's the type of people I personally want to hang out with and spend my time with. And I think it's in the world that is so negative and focused on all of the bad things going on, like it's kind of a very optimistic and exciting space to be a part of because so many people that are involved in it in the early days. And I heard about this in the original internet. It was like this before all of these big companies got all cutthroat and was just focused on making money. Like there's just amazing innovators and smart people that are in this space. And it makes me really excited to be a part of it.
I couldn't agree with you more. And ironically, you talking made me think about it. And I realized there's this parallel where we actually both came into it originally from a curiosity point of view. And we've now both collectively worked in the space professionally for 3 years and has both changed our lives in different ways.
Yeah.
And the industry is still very small and very
Oh my gosh.
relatively
It's
new,
so small in the
But
grand
like we
scheme of
could have
things.
never
Yeah.
predicted that 4 years ago that it was going to change our lives in that way, both professionally and also to your point, the relationships and people we'd make from that, and the life experiences we'd get from that. And so, looking back at it, it's cool to reflect a bit on that and be like, yeah, this is a cool trajectory.
100%. It's definitely worth it to be curious just at a personal level and try and figure out what's going on, right? Like what's all the hype about? Why does this matter? And experience it for yourself, right? And then you can make your own judgments off of that.
Yep. 100%. Okay, I think we'll finish it there. But for anyone listening, if you made it this far, please let us know what you took away from it. Or, if you're now just curious to learn more, and we're definitely happy to help people more, but there's so many great resources out there. Gabriel mentioned a few of them during the course of this, and some great people. So yeah, I hope that you got a bit of an insight into our world and that you're curious to continue learning. For anyone listening and want to follow Gabriel's journey more closely, links to his socials will be in the description. Gabriel, thank you again for coming on today and for the open conversation.
My pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow us, to leave a review, and to connect with us on our socials.